This webinar will provide you with information on the Paul Wellstone and Pete Domenici Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act of 2008. In order to understand what parity means in behavioral health care, it's helpful to begin with an understanding of what the word parity means. Simply put, parity means to be equal. Parity is about fairness. Americans with behavioral health conditions often have more difficulty getting the treatment and services they need when compared to individuals seeking other medical care. The slide shows former Congressman Kennedy speaking at a field hearing about parity implementation and enforcement. The two federal laws that address parity are the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act and the Affordable Care Act. For this webinar, we will focus on the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act. The Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act is a complex piece of federal legislation. Because of its complexity, 3 federal agencies are responsible for overseeing the enforcement of the law. They are the Department of Labor, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Department of the Treasury.
My life began to spiral out of control. I am an addict and alcoholic, and I was finally ready to get help. I had insurance coverage through a major carrier. I wanted to get treatment in another state because I had family there and a network of support. I searched the internet and found a co-occurring treatment facility that accepted my insurance. I contacted the facility, hopeful that I could get started with treatment right away. When I told the intake coordinator that I was coming from another state, she discouraged me from coming there. She said my insurance probably wouldn't pay for my treatment. Only after I insisted did she finally take down my insurance information and promise to call me back once she verified my coverage. She did call me back the next day, but told me that I had no substance abuse treatment benefits and that the facility was out of network. This didn't seem right to me. I knew that I had substance abuse treatment benefits, and the treatment facility's own website had said they were in network. I felt like I was getting the runaround. All I wanted to do was get treatment and get well. I was willing to do whatever it took, but it didn't seem like my insurance company or the treatment program were on my side. I contacted my sister, who is very knowledgeable about the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Act. Together, we called the treatment center and spoke with the person who verified my insurance benefits. She continued to discourage me from coming there. My sister and I then called my insurance company. The person we spoke with was very patient and thorough. We told him what the treatment program had told us, and we asked him, what about parity? If behavioral health services are offered in the plan, shouldn't they be offered on par with primary medical services? He quoted the mental health and substance abuse treatment benefits that were available to me. He said that the treatment provider was in network. This meant I could access treatment with the program I had chosen. Together, my sister and I called the treatment program. We told them what the insurance company had told us. We asked them, what about parity? The treatment center reached out to the insurance company. The insurance company verified that I did have coverage and that the treatment center was in network. The treatment program then called me back and told me that there was coverage, but that there were certain criteria I would have to meet in order for the insurance to authorize payment. I set up an appointment for an assessment. When I arrived at the treatment program, the process began with paperwork and blood work. I met with a financial person. I was told my insurance probably wouldn't cover residential treatment, but possibly partial hospitalization and almost for sure outpatient treatment. I was asked to pay $1,500 up front, which I did with the help of my family. An assessment was completed, and I was admitted to the residential facility after all. That is where I began my recovery, thanks to the parity law.
Parity is the law and requires that if a health insurance plan offers behavioral health benefits, it must offer them on par with physical health benefits. That means that when coverage for behavioral health care is provided, it must be equal to the coverage provided for physical health benefits. The law says 3 things: Health insurance plans cannot require higher deductibles, higher copayments, and higher out-of-pocket expenses for your behavioral health than they do for other medical benefits. Secondly, health insurance plans cannot put higher limitations on the frequency of treatment, number of visits, or days of coverage for your behavioral health care than they do for other medical care. And finally, health insurance plans cannot review behavioral health treatment more frequently to determine if it is medically necessary, or use more restrictive criteria for what is medically necessary than they do for other medical care. The law does not require that all health insurance plans offer behavioral health coverage, but if a health insurance plan covers any behavioral health benefits, the coverage must be equal to medical benefits. State parity laws can provide additional rights beyond the federal parity law by mandating coverage of behavioral health benefits and/or placing stricter parity requirements on insurance plans. The terms behavioral health and mental health are often used interchangeably. Behavioral health care includes prevention and treatment of mental health disorders such as depression and anxiety, and prevention and treatment of substance use disorders such as alcoholism or drug dependence. Treatment for neurological issues such as autism spectrum disorder and attention deficit disorder, and treatment for eating disorders and gambling dependence are also part of behavioral health care.
How do I know if I have parity rights?
Your parity rights are determined by whether you get your insurance through your employer, your state's health exchange marketplace, the government, or on your own. Most types of insurance plans have to follow the federal parity law, but there are a few exceptions. If you are insured by your employer and unsure of what kind of plan you have, contact your employer's Human Resources Department. If you purchase insurance yourself and are unsure of which kind of plan you have, contact your insurance provider. Common consumer issues or violations of the parity law can, once identified, be addressed. There are several common consumer questions that will be addressed in this webinar.
I have a separate deductible for behavioral health services that is not part of my overall deductible.
Having separate deductibles for behavioral health services and other medical services may be a violation of the parity law.
My copay for behavioral health services is higher than it is for other services.
Insurance plans requiring more expensive copayments or coinsurance for behavioral health services than for specialty medical services may be in violation of the parity law.
I have limits on how many days I can stay in a treatment facility.
If your insurance plan does not have the same limits on how many days you can stay in any other kind of inpatient medical facility, this may be a parity violation.
I have limits on how many times I can see a behavioral health provider.
If your insurance plan does not have the same limits on how many times you can see a medical health provider for any other type of treatment, this may be a parity violation.
My prescription medication for a behavioral health condition costs more than my medication for medical issues.
If your insurance plan charges more for prescription medications simply because they treat a behavioral health condition, this may be a parity violation.
My insurance plan makes me get permission before I can start behavioral health treatment.
If permission to begin behavioral health treatment is required more often than it is for other health services, this may be a parity violation.
My insurance plan often makes me get permission to continue my behavioral health treatment.
If your insurer orders medical necessity reviews for behavioral health treatment more often than for medical treatment, this may be a violation of the parity law.
My insurance refuses to pay for residential behavioral health treatment that my doctor says that I need.
If your insurance will not cover residential treatment or partial hospitalization for behavioral health services, but covers this for medical services, this may be a parity violation.
My doctor says I need a certain behavioral health treatment, but my insurer says I need less expensive treatment first.
If your insurance plan requires you to try a less expensive treatment before it will cover the treatment recommended by your doctor, this may be a parity violation.
My insurance plan won't pay for behavioral health treatment outside of my state or region.
If your insurance plan puts geographical limits on where you can receive behavioral health treatment, but does not do the same for other medical services, this may be a parity violation. We can take action.
I believe my insurance plan is not complying with the Parity law. Now what?
If your plan provides behavioral health coverage, but the benefits are less than under your medical coverage, or behavioral health benefits cost more in copays and coinsurance, you can take action. To find out where to make complaints about Parity compliance, visit the user-friendly Mental Health and Addiction Consumer Portal at hhs.gov. Fill out the online questionnaire to determine where to complain about compliance based on the type of coverage you have and where you live.
I believe my insurance plan has denied behavioral health treatment in violation of the law. What can I do?
If you believe that your insurance plan has denied coverage in violation of the law, you can take action. Appealing denial of coverage must be done through an insurance provider. There are several important steps to follow in order to have a successful outcome. 1. Retain all records and bills from treatment. 2. Find out why your treatment was denied. Request a written reason for denial of coverage. Insurers are required by law to provide this in the form of an explanation of benefits or a letter detailing denial of medical necessity. If you cannot find out on your own, your provider should be able to get this information. 3. Have your provider submit a letter to the insurer explaining the medical necessity of treatment. 4. Find out how to file an appeal. This varies by insurer and can be found on insurer websites or in plan documents under Appeals and Grievances. And 5. Find out what type of appeal to file and determine if you need an expedited appeal for immediate treatment. If your initial appeal is denied, you can further appeal to an independent external entity. Insurers are required to have an external appeal process. This can also be found on insurer websites, patient portals, or in-plan documents. If all appeals fail, file a grievance with your local regulatory agency. You may decide to hire an attorney to pursue legal action against your insurance plan for denial of coverage. Your insurer may not charge you for the internal appeals process and will rarely charge any fees for an external appeal. Regulatory agencies do not charge fees for filing of grievances. If you decide to take legal action, you will have to pay any legal fees associated with this. Even though parity is the law, it is often difficult for individuals with behavioral health conditions to get the treatment and services they need. It is important for all Americans to understand their rights under the parity law and how to take action if their behavioral health treatment is being unfairly restricted. Consumers can complain if planned benefits do not comply with parity. Consumers can complain if benefits are denied in violation of parity. Benefits administrators can complain if plans do not comply with parity. Providers can complain if they notice a pattern of coverage denial in violation of parity. The final rule on parity came out on November 13, 2013, and went into effect in 2014. Since then, the New York Attorney General's office has investigated several large insurance companies and found them to be out of compliance with the provisions of the law. The companies were sanctioned, subject to monitoring, and required to conform with the law. Parity complaints have been filed in other states, with results of those cases still pending. There have been no formal complaints in Colorado. Lack of complaints does not necessarily indicate compliance with parity law. It may indicate lack of consumer knowledge of rights and action steps. There are resources available to learn more about parity, parity rights, and enforcement. Parity Track is a collaborative forum and the central site for parity. Parity Track seeks to help consumers understand their rights under the federal and state parity laws and to help consumers feel empowered to exercise those rights. Parity Track also tracks complaints about parity. If you file a parity appeal or complaint, please register with Parity Track. The Parity Implementation Coalition and the Kennedy Forum have jointly released the Parity Resource Guide for addiction and mental health consumers, providers, and advocates. The guide provides help on behavioral health insurance appeals and coverage limitations. The Colorado Division of Insurance can answer questions regarding compliance with parity and Colorado law. The division also accepts formal grievance filings regarding parity and denials of coverage. The Colorado Coalition for Parity is a community coalition of providers and agencies that serve individuals, families, and communities affected by substance use and mental health disorders. To learn more about the coalition or to attend a coalition meeting, please contact Megan Marks Varela at Peer Assistance Services at mmarx@peerassist.org.